I'm Dan Drake. This is Visitor Network TV. Our guest today is Linda Williams, the chair of the Historic District Commission. Linda?
Hi.
Good to see you. The HDC has undergone something of a transition recently. And I'm sort of interested in your perspective on how things are working out in terms of the many issues which have been raised about the way the HDC has worked in the past and the way it should be working, and I know town council's been involved and so forth. How has that played out?
I think we're readjusting. We can't fix everything all at one time. I've got like a whole list of stuff here, but we can't fix everything at one time. So we've got to compartmentalize. We have to fix the legislation. We have to revamp Building with Nantucket in mind. It's decades out of whack, and it's not user-friendly. And the way things are approached or thought about today is different than when they first did Building with Nantucket in mind. And we had staffing issues, and it was a tsunami, basically, a perfect storm where multiple prongs just sort of ran into each other all at one time over the last couple of years. So we have to dig ourselves out of the position we put ourselves in. But I think the meetings are run a little quicker. Even with the increased workload, we are now running about 100 and something every week, which is phenomenal.
I mean, it's sort of depending on the building cycle.
Yes, it goes up and goes down.
It goes up and down. What's been the peak, would you say, in your experience?
Well, in the 16 plus that I've been on, back probably the first 4 or 5 years, we had 150 things on a week. And we would go from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. Then the school shut us down, and we all had to be out at 9 o'clock. And that was great. 4 hours in that day, and then 3 or 4 hours on Thursday, and then your couple of hours on the weekend for viewings. That was enough. So going to 10, we just all droop at 9.
So that was 150. Now you say you're at around 130?
We're over 100 now.
Over 100 now.
And we're on a regular basis. And the projects are more complicated, and they're bigger. And, I want all my accoutrements from where I live in New Jersey or Connecticut in my house up here, which on the mainland, the interiors drive the exteriors. On Nantucket, the exterior drives the interior. And we're in a major struggle with people with that. And that's why there's some frustration on the board's part, because some of the designers and architects don't bother to bring it in. We waste our time, they waste the client's money, they waste their time, and that just makes these meetings go on ad nauseum when they don't have to. Because there are certain things that we're not going to approve. Why push it? Tell the client, it's not going to go forward with that element. Don't waste everybody's time. We spend a lot of time peddling in place with things we don't need to see.
Could some of that be done by the staff so it doesn't get to the commission and take the commission's time?
Some of the staff are having a hard time dealing with whatever they're supposed to be doing, like inspections, answering the public's questions, which are endless. We do have a couple of new people in the Plus staff that were just hired. And Ann Barrett's been doing a great job. James Greeter's been doing a great job with these complicated agendas and trying to keep everybody on the agenda without dropping people like was going on before. So I think things are beginning to change. We're getting a little bit more support. Job descriptions are changing a little bit. Who's going to be doing what is changing. We are in constant contact with Steve Cohen about helping to draft some of the legislative changes, things like that. We want to have some of this stuff ready for our April town meeting, for sure.
Is Steve doing that work, or is town council doing that work?
Town council, cost prohibitive, probably. So it's probably going to be up to us to identify and then run whatever we want to do through town council, as opposed to having town council draft it and come back to us.
Interesting. I would have thought it would be more efficient the other way. Town council.
Well, we've talked to him about it, and it's not efficient.
It isn't.
Because he's doing the heavy lifting, and he doesn't need to be involved at the grassroots level. The legislation is clearly, paragraph by paragraph, out of date. Our legislation is different from the rest of the state, because three of us were created differently.
Is there going to be an effort as part of this to expand the authority of the HDC?
I don't think that's on the table at the moment. That's what started the Sturm and Drang a year ago for the special town meeting a year ago. I don't think we're going there right now. What we may do with the legislation, because it's so nebulous, is clarify So it's a little bit more able to be relied on as to how we're supposed to operate.
Is it your hope to have something ready for annual town meeting?
Absolutely. We're going to probably start having some serious discussions next week and at least identify the issues we got to bring, because the HCC is having an organizational meeting on the 29th of October. And we hope to bang out a lot of these issues and really solidify who's doing what to get it done.
One of the, we talked about this interview yesterday, one of the things that has been, I think, an issue for in people's minds is the public perception of the HDC.
It's horrible.
Well, it is.
And it's been horrible long before I came around, and long before Dirk was there. It was horrible way back.
And everything else you do isn't going to do a whole lot of good, is it? Unless you can change the public's perception of...
I don't know if that's ever going to change. It's basically a necessary evil. People's egos are stepped on because it's their design, or everybody pours their heart and soul, and a local person pours their heart and soul into that design, and then it gets whacked when it gets down at the table. You feel it from them.
But at some levels, it's more basic than that. I mean, I got a report from a meeting a couple of weeks ago.
I wasn't at that meeting.
I know you weren't at that meeting, but it doesn't matter. There was a meeting.
I heard about it after the meeting as well.
One of the members of the commission was clearly disengaged, even though he was participating in a particular matter and very actively participating in a particular matter. The rest of it, he gave the impression of being totally disengaged from the... And, there have been other instances where people have been treated rudely. And there is the obvious question about, the sort of this subjectivity of the decisions and the inability to, provide a standard that at least most people can rely on.
It's a subjective process, because you have a design that may work in Pocomo that is not going to work on Main Street, and the Main Street design is not going to work in Tom Nevers or Sconset and Matticat. So it's a very subjective thing anyway, because we're dealing with design. We're dealing with touchy-feely. I want this window. I want that, outside pool. I want, it's a touchy-feely, very subjective thing. The problem is that you get 5 different opinions when you sit down at that table. And if you have an architect or designer or an owner, I want this, and I don't care who you are, because you're just a bunch of local idiots. We get that a lot. It causes an adversarial position, because they're going to, entrench, and we're going to dig in. And if they're not willing to work through the process, we rarely deny anything, because we try to work through to a design that we all can live with. But every once in a while, you're going to get somebody who's, I want this, and I'm going to have it. And that's where a lot of the tension arises. But it's going to be an adversarial position sometimes that we have to take. I mean, last night we denied something. It was outrageous, what they came in for. And we didn't waste any time denying it. And that person's not going to be happy.
What was it? You don't have to name any names, but what was it?
It was an anomaly in Matticat. I'm sure you're aware of it. If you walk down Tennessee.
I'm not, actually. I haven't been down there in a while.
Drive down I Street. And we all went out to look at it, and we'd never seen anything like it, ever.
Is this something that had been approved previously?
No. And they had started the work, and they'd started putting in the pilings without coming to the HDC first, which upset some of the board members.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're supposed to come to you first.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the person who did it was a landscaper, and he wasn't aware that landscaping timbers are within our jurisdiction in this particular case. So you're going to get these adversarial positions, and some people feel affronted because we don't like their design, or it's architecturally inappropriate, and we want revisions, and they hate it. They hate the process. Plus, who wants to go sit there at 5 o'clock and not get heard until 8:45?
Well, that's
because
true.
There's 100 and some odd things on there.
Right.
So the length.
But it also gives people an opportunity to watch and see the interactions, which I think somehow
can be testy.
Reinforces their negative perception of the process.
But for probably the last 20 years, when the elections occur, there are more. I'm not going to vote for the HDC just because I hate the institution of the HDC and what I have to go through to get there from here. Then there are voting for the candidates. So every time there's an election, there's 700 or 800 people voting in opposition by
just not voting.
Not voting because they don't like the HDC and the process, not the individual sitting at the table. They just don't like the HDC and what they have to go through. But on the flip side of that coin, it's what keeps people coming to Nantucket and what keeps Nantucket special and maintains the historic character, unlike any place else in the country. This is a living historical community, not like Williamsburg or Mystic or some of these other enclaves of, oh, let's go look at Disney World and history. It's a living, breathing historical community with people living in 300-year-old houses. That you don't find that anywhere else in the country.
Isn't that
in
part of
mass.
I mean, that's part of the problem, that people are living here, and they are their houses, and there are...
They feel intensely about their houses.
They feel intensely about their houses. They also feel there are practical solutions to some of these problems.
True, and we need to work with them better.
And
I fully agree.
Because many cases, the solution that the HDC comes up with is expensive.
And not what they want.
And not what they want. And so it costs them in terms of time and money and ego and everything else.
Absolutely, which again creates the adversarial positions on both sides of that.
Is there anything that the HDC can do, though, to sort of itself from within to improve that?
I don't know if you can change the system enough to do away with that. Because the egos are always going to be there. The ownership of their design is always going to be there. I want is always going to be there. And why can't I have a pink house on Main Street type thing?
Well, one of the things, for example, and one of the commissioners mentioned this to me recently, that you know, it is a board that's supposed to act by majority. And, you know, I've raised the question in the past at candidates' nights about, again, putting aside the present ability of the staff to do it, but shouldn't 90% of what comes before the commission be dealt with by the staff?
No.
And let me just finish the question. The reason being that it would simplify everybody's life considerably if the staff had that ability, and clearly had to have the capability as well. That's understood. That's understood. But if they make a decision and then can one commissioner reverse that decision, or does it have to be a majority?
Well, they don't have that power now, so I wouldn't know how it would work in practicality.
If they take a no action, or what they say approved, you know, at the commission, at the staff level. They
can't do that now. Well, let's say hypothetically the staff had some jurisdiction to approve minor things, and we drive by and see something that's like, seriously, we got a problem. It's already approved. If they won't approve something...
Well, you have to have confidence in the staff.
Right.
I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah, and they have to have the time to do it, and they barely have the time to do what they're doing now.
But what I'm getting at is, isn't this a situation that should be striven for? And we should try to get to that point.
I think there's stuff that the staff can do to get more stuff on consent. The consent block is that stuff that's like, you know, I'm putting up a fence or I'm doing this or that, which is that block at the beginning. We block vote them. Not enough attention is paid to what should be on there.
If there's one commissioner who doesn't like what's on there, can it be pulled out?
Yes, and we do that occasionally.
At one commissioner's request, not a majority.
No, they can pull it out. We just look at the plan, and either we put it back in the consent or we hold it and have a regular hearing on it with the applicant, because there's something something amiss. Let's put it that way. I think more attention needs to be paid to putting stuff on the consent. And part of putting stuff on the consent, when we had no staff at one point back in February, I had to do the agenda, and I had to take over what's on consent, what isn't on the consent. I went through them, and something was like one window away from consent. I called them, had them bring in what they needed to get on consent, and then I put it on consent. That's a way of getting a tremendous amount of this stupid stuff off the agenda, but that's not getting done.
Yeah,
so
that's the kind of again, shouldn't that be what you strive for?
Absolutely. Yeah. But you have to take the time to look at it, but you also have to take the time to call the applicant or the designer, and that's not happening at all. So it either goes on cold or it doesn't go on, and we waste a lot of time in the regular agenda doing a rock wall, doing a fence, saying, can you move the structure back 10 feet? All that stuff could be handled at the staff level and then put on consent. But that's not happening. Whether because they just don't want to do it, or whether because there's not enough time. That's the kind of stuff we need to work towards. You're right. And we need to work towards simplifying those stupid applications, which don't fit everything.
Do you think the entire commission is on board with that? The fact
the whole commission's on board with trying to improve the situation whatever way we can. And whatever suggestions people want to bring up, because we get suggestions at the organizational meetings. But it's hard to get organizational meetings every month because we can't pull out of the regular rotation, because then that puts everybody back 2 or 3 weeks. So this is a 5th Tuesday. We generally take the 5th Tuesday and have an organizational meeting, and October 29th is the 5th Tuesday. And hopefully a lot of the nuts and bolts at that point, not these endless philosophical discussions, which is what we've had the last 3, getting nowhere at all, drives me crazy. We got great stuff on the agenda, can't get there from here because we're having philosophical discussions. Not happening. October 29th, we're getting down in the trenches. We're going to identify what it is we're going to do for town meeting, identify what we need to improve immediately, and start moving. It's just hard to get, 8 people on the same page sometimes. But everybody wants to improve it. Not everybody agrees on how to improve it. That's where we have to define it a little bit more effectively.
Maybe the trick is to divide up some of the things that need to be improved. And
you guys do that, you guys do that, you guys do that. But we got to give them a template to even start the discussion, which is what I think Cohen and myself are going to come up with, some sort of a template.
So have you co-opted him, Steve?
No, I think he's co-opted the HDC. We see him every single week. This is his new career as HDC. But he knows every piece of that building with Nantucket in mind, and he knows every piece of that legislation. We don't necessarily agree. But he doesn't want to destroy the HDC. He just wants to make it easier for everybody to understand what they need to do.
I think is what everybody wants, and eventually.
Of course. And we want to do an informational packet. So it solves a lot of the questions. Why do I need to do this? What do I need to do this? And why do I have to do this? And da-da-da-da. And have a little fold-out that you hand somebody, and they can see, this is why we need the pictures. This is why we need the previous approval. This is why we need this. This is what this means. As-built means, this, all that kind of stuff, and that hopefully will solve some of the problems. So we get stuff in the works.
Linda, thank you. Good luck. Linda Williams,
thank
chair
you.
of the HDC.